I remember vividly the day I walked out of the house, duffel bag heavy in my hand, feeling the cool night air against my skin. My heart was pounding, a furious drumbeat echoing the chaos inside my head. I was 19, on the brink of adulthood, and leaving after a confrontation that marked the end of years of abuse. The streetlights cast long shadows, a reminder of the unstable ground I was now treading. As I walked away from the house that had been more of a prison than a home, I couldn't help but feel a twinge of fear. What if the shadow of her rage followed me, even out here? But beneath that fear was a simmering anger, a fire stoked over years of abuse and neglect. This was my stand, my quiet rebellion against a woman who had stolen my childhood and tried to shatter my spirit. I had no savings and no idea where I would sleep that night. My thoughts were a cacophony of self-doubt and determination. Each step I took felt like a step into the unknown, a step away from the past that clung to me like a second skin. I could almost hear her voice, dripping with disdain, as she laughed at my misfortune. That laugh was the final push I needed to sever the last fragile thread of hope, that maybe one day she might change. In those first few weeks, the city became my harsh, unforgiving companion. I learned to navigate its shadows, finding solace in the anonymity it provided. Yet, every night as I lay down on a park bench or curled up in a corner of a shelter, I was plagued by restless dreams and memories that refused to stay buried. The sound of her footsteps on the stairs, the sting of a slap, the cold metal of a knife at my throat, these memories were ghosts that danced around me, whispering reminders of a life I was desperate to leave behind. There were moments when I almost faltered, when the weight of everything threatened to crush me. One particularly cold night, huddled under a thin blanket in a doorway, I found myself on the brink of despair. The city was quiet, save for the occasional distant siren, and I felt an overwhelming loneliness that was almost suffocating. For a brief, terrifying moment, I wondered if she had been right, if I really was destined for failure. But then, as if in answer to my silent plea, I remembered the faces of my younger siblings. I couldn't let them suffer as I had. I couldn't let her win. As I slowly clawed my way out of homelessness, finding a job and then a small apartment, I was driven by a singular purpose: justice. Not just for myself, but for the siblings who had no voice, no escape. The planning became a ritual, a way to channel the anger and pain into something constructive. I documented everything, each photo and video a testament to the truth she so vehemently denied. With each piece of evidence I gathered, I felt a little more empowered, a little more in control. But there were close calls, moments when the plan almost unraveled. One evening, while accessing her email to gather more evidence, I nearly got caught. I had borrowed a friend's laptop at a cafe, the dim lighting casting long shadows across the screen. Suddenly, a notification popped up. A message from her, sent to the very account I was accessing. My heart skipped a beat, a sickening lurch that left me momentarily frozen. I quickly closed the laptop, my hands shaking as I scanned the room, half expecting to see her standing there, eyes ablaze with fury. In the end, it was my younger sister who provided the crucial turning point. Her courage in reaching out to me, sharing her own experiences and photos, was both heartbreaking and galvanizing. I knew then that I couldn't falter. Not when they were counting on me. I meticulously compiled everything, the weight of it, both a burden and a shield. When I finally made the call to Child Protective Services, my voice was steady, but inside I was a tempest of nerves and fear. The waiting was the hardest part. Each day stretched into an eternity, filled with anxious speculation and the gnawing fear of failure. What if they didn't believe me? What if she managed to manipulate her way out of this, as she had so many times before? I barely slept, my mind a relentless carousel of worst-case scenarios. I took solace in the small victories, like when I overheard my mother's best friend gossiping about the investigation. Her disbelief, a bitter reminder of the facade my mother had so carefully constructed. When the day finally came, when the police and CPS knocked on her door, I was a bundle of frayed nerves and anticipation. I imagined the scene unfolding, the shock on her face, the righteous anger as her carefully crafted world began to crumble. It should have felt like a victory, but instead I was left with an unsettling emptiness. This was what I had worked for, yet it brought no joy, only a hollow sense of vindication. Even after the dust had settled, after she lost her job and her children, I found myself grappling with a complex mix of emotions. Part of me wanted to reach out, to confront her with the truth, to see her face as she realized the extent of my actions. But another part of me, the part that had learned to survive in silence, wanted to stay hidden, to remain the unseen hand that had set her downfall in motion. In the weeks that followed, I threw myself into my work and hobbies, desperate to drown out the echoes of the past. The city was both a refuge and a reminder, its streets filled with memories I couldn't quite shake. I kept tabs on my siblings, reassured by their resilience and the knowledge that they were safe. Yet there was a persistent ache, a longing for something I couldn't quite name. Perhaps it was closure, or maybe it was the hope that one day I could rebuild what had been broken. There were moments of clarity where I could almost see a path forward, a way to mend the fractured pieces of my life. But they were fleeting, often overshadowed by the weight of the past and the ever-present specter of my mother's influence. I knew I needed help, that the cycle of self-destruction I was caught in would eventually consume me if I didn't find a way out. Yet, admitting that felt like a betrayal of everything I'd fought for, a sign of weakness in a world that demanded strength. As I sat in the dim light of my apartment, surrounded by the quiet hum of the city, I found myself at a crossroads. The path ahead was uncertain, shrouded in shadows and the lingering echoes of the past. But for the first time I felt a flicker of hope, a tentative belief that maybe, just maybe, I could find my way out of the darkness. The journey wouldn't be easy, and the scars would always remain, but perhaps there was a future worth fighting for. And so I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the road ahead, a road that would demand courage, resilience, and a willingness to face the truths I'd long tried to avoid. It was time to step out of the shadows, to reclaim the life that had been stolen from me. With determination and a newfound sense of purpose, I began to take the first steps toward healing, knowing that the battle was far from over, but hopeful that one day I might finally find peace.